Yo, what's going on, guys? It's G Miners here. Haven't done that intro for a while, but with Onslaught coming out, I wanted to go over the main Hunter build that I found made Legend Onslaught far easier. If you guys do want builds for other classes, please let me know in the comments down below, especially if this helps you get to wave 50. This is just what I mained yesterday, and we were able to get wave 50 done relatively easy. I figured most players might struggle to get wave 50 done, especially on legend difficulty. I definitely play my fair share of PvE, and I even struggled to get this done with some other setups, and the error codes definitely didn't help. You definitely want the right builds on to make it as easy as possible, because even if you guys do make a mistake or two, it becomes pretty easy to wipe. The main aspects of the build that I'm covering in this video for Hunter are going to be 1. Lucky Pants as your main exotic for doing insane burst damage. Not to mention it's also just a primary weapon, so you have basically infinite burst damage with this on, and then also doing Orpheus rig swaps whenever you drop your tether for more uptime and energy back. Tether is insane in this mode. You are defending a point. Ads tend to spawn really in just one lane at a time at 2 different spawn points, but it's typically just one lane, which means you can throw down a tether, get everything super congested, and then grouping them up with this is going to be applying a debuff that's also chaining their damage together. This makes O-Rigs even stronger than usual since you have a really high uptime with Tether, and since we're able to swap to get that 50% back, that means we can main Lucky Pants as our exotic the rest of the time to deal with all the tanky enemies and tormentors. It's also great damage against the bosses, plus it keeps options open for our special and heavy weapons to be ad clear or to also be used for damage. So this entire setup just requires 2 exotics in the exact same slot, which can be used for an easy and quick swap, and then just 1 primary weapon. Ultimately, as the difficulty scales, both these exotics handle everything really well, and you're also able to utilize invis effects for safety whenever you need it. I did also do this setup with 2 people on Hunter, with 2 people on Warlock, so it all works really well with multiple different class setups, assuming you're running optimal builds. And most importantly, I think the tormentors are the hardest thing to deal with, and then with Lucky Pants on, that tends to make quick work of them, especially if you have one of your Warlocks or just anyone else using Div Bubble on them, so that you can make sure you're hitting and landing all your crits super easily when they're spazzing around, so you can maximize your damage on them. That is basically all the general info on the build that you need. So now let's go over everything that you guys should be running. Okay, first things first, with this build, obviously we're doing a lot of Lucky Pants swaps into O-Rigs. Lucky Pants we're gonna have on probably 90% of the time, and then anytime we drop Tether, we're going to quickly swap to O-Rigs. So for that reason, if you're not used to quick swaps, just make sure these exotics are next to each other in your inventory. You don't wanna have a situation like this where you're on O-Rigs and then you want to find Lucky Pants and you kind of come into your inventory, do this, and then you have to do it once over. Just make sure they're next to each other so you can quickly move exotics around just like that. And then we're on Lucky Pants, we can quickly swap over 1 little inventory slots and then pop O-Rigs on. The other nice part about this is you can pop O-Rigs on whenever you want. A lot of the times, if I need a quick tether down, I can just cast tether like this, put on O-Rigs, and then as enemies hit this over time, you're going to slowly get your 50%, and you can just do that in the off chance that you don't have time to swap to them beforehand and then hit everything on that initial tether. So it doesn't really matter when you swap to O-Rigs, just keep that in mind. Just get your tether down, swap. Once you get 50% back, swap back to Lucky Pants. When it comes to your weapons for Lucky Pants, you either want Malfeasance, or if you have it, a Warden's Law. I think Warden's Law is better. It's better per combination with 4 times and Vorpal. You're never going against Taken, so Malfeasance isn't really that preferable. I just don't have one. Plus, Malfeasance is going to consume your exotic slot. When it comes to your other weapons, you tend to want to run Ad Clear because you're doing all your damage with the Lucky Pants combo. So for that reason, I had Forbearance on. This is great and should be one-shotting up until around wave 30 on Legend. And the Commemoration was great, especially for single targets that might have been further away, or if I ran out of Forbearance ammo. That was amazing, especially when the Lucky Pants rotation was down. But if you do have your exotic slot open because you're on Warden's Law, you could easily sub in a Gallarhorn and have much better ad clear overall. The only other issue that I see with this loadout as I have it is with Malfeasance, we only really have access to dealing with unstop champions. That being said, you could still fry an Overload or an anti-barrier if you have the Lucky Pants combo and like a Weaken Nade or a Smoke Bomb ready to go to apply that debuff. That said, if you do run a rocket here, you can use Overload Rocket, so that deals with overloads, and then honestly any weapon while you're inside of a Warlock's Well of Radiance, which you should also pretty much always have when doing Legend Onslaught. you'll also be able to deal with those anti-barriers. So I don't think it's that big of an issue overall, but if you are solo or alone and need to deal with a champion, you're really only going to easily be able to deal with unstops. Right here is the default Voidwalker setup that I tend to run. Obviously, you want to be on Deadfall. This is the best super with O-Rigs, which you absolutely should be using. This will group everything up. It changes the damage between them all. It's a 30% debuff. It's amazing. And again, we're getting 50% of our super back, assuming we hit enough enemies. So as long as you don't just whiff your tether, put it in a bad spot, you have an insane amount of uptime with this. And I say you get around 50% back, but if you do have a good tether, O-Rigs gives you that first initial 50%, and then if you're getting enough kills and dealing obviously enough damage to enemies inside of that tether, you can easily get your full super back. After that, I like Marksman dodge. Gamblers also works if you want the extra smoke bomb charges. I just like Marksman because I can do Lucky Pants, dodge reload, stay invis for a bit, let the out of luck timer cool down, and then go back into that rotation without having to always make sure I'm reloading each and every time. And then after that, I also just really like Vortex Grenade. Certain nades like Scatter will obviously kill you if you use them at your feet. I've done that in a certain video. And Vortex Grenade is also really, really good for just throwing and applying a longer lasting debuff to enemies. When it comes to our two aspects, we have Trapper's Ambush and then Vanishing Step, Dodge Invis, and then Smoke Bomb Invis. Also with the dive if you want to do the diving cloud with Trapper's Ambush. That's all they really offer. I think they're just an easy default thing to have on. You don't really gain much out of Stylus Executioner. This is really, really good with your Falcons and that setup, but we're obviously not doing that. Lucky Pants is way more valuable, in my opinion, in Legend Onslaught, so there's really no reason for this. And then obviously if your teammates are down or you're in a sketchy situation or you need to do some of the objectives like the mines or the control points that you have to capture, having multiple sources of invis is really helpful. This is my typical fragment setup for Void Hunter. First up is Echo of Undermining to weaken targets with our nade. You don't need this since we do have Snare Bomb. If you want to burn that, you could also, again, run Gambler's Dodge, so you have way more of an uptime on your Snare Bomb. But I still like having Vortex to have 15% more damage. And then again, if we're for some reason out of our dodge, out of our Smoke Bomb, then we can still throw a nade if we have it, weaken something, and then use our Lucky Pants rotation for 15% more damage, which is massive. Next up is Echo of Obscurity. Finisher Final Blows give us Invis. This is really nice so that we have Invis on demand, even if all of our abilities are on cooldown. This is really nice, especially for Rift. There were quite a few times when we were up in waves, things were one-shotting you, especially the boss. It would sometimes slam even if it was targeting your teammates. So just having one person carry the Rift, do invis once, get halfway, do like a dodge invis or a smoke bomb invis for the second half, just made it really safe, especially since you're doing that every 10 waves. You don't really need to do it, but it's just an extra precaution if you want. Echo Persistence is great. That's just longer invis duration. And then after that, Echo of Starvation so that we get Devour. On Hunter, this was nerfed, but it should still be giving us 100 HP every single kill we get. So this is going to keep us pretty much full health most of the run. On screen right now are all the mods I use in the build. Obviously, you can sub these out for whatever you want. I don't think the mods are that pressing to have on. So again, run whatever combo works best for you if you want to change things up. The reason I ran some of these mods was for Heavy Ammo Finder and Scout. This is just for team ammo economy. I cleared a lot with my exotic primary, which was obviously Malfeasance. So that helped get a ton of ammo scouts to be on the ground for us. And anytime I was just out of luck and I wasn't getting that max damage, I would just use Kinetic Loader, quickly reload. This makes a huge difference, and then just keep killing ads. So for that reason, I found Heavy Ammo Scout to be pretty useful along with Heavy Ammo Finder. You can change your siphon to whatever you want. Harmonic is great if you're using Commemoration. You can use Arc for Forbearance. You can still use Kinetic if you want to use your Malfeasance or your Warden's Law for most, or your ad clear as well. After that, just change your resist to whatever enemy type you're going up against. I also stuck on 3x kinetic weapon surges. This is 22% more damage to my Lucky Pants rotation. I was typically always stacked with my armor charges because of things like powerful attraction, because I could dodge and pick things up. I had time dilation, so with three armor charge stacks, that's going to be 45 seconds of your 22% increased damage. And then in the case that I picked up a bunch of orbs and we needed special, I could do a special finisher as well. You could obviously sub this out depending on how many armor charge stacks you're sitting at. That is the mod setup that I had on. I thought it worked the best, especially against bosses. When we would run in and drop our Well of Radiance, I would instantly get 45 seconds of max kinetic weapon surges. I'd shoot my tether down, so we had a debuff. I was also buffed, obviously being inside of the well at 25%. So you're quickly combining to get the max damage off for your Lucky Pants rotation. And you can easily do around a third of the boss's health bar, maybe even half the boss's health bar right off rip, just in the earlier rounds. That is pretty much it for the build and the video, guys. Other than that, though, the main thing we found worked best for making it as far as possible and eventually to wave 50 was saving scrap until round 21 to spend on our third ADU location. That way we could get a ton of the higher level traps when the difficulty actually scaled up, since you don't really need any help for the first 20 waves. We also seem to like tripwires the best, then decoys, then turrets. We pretty much never really bought a turret because they seem to suck in our runs, but I did have others tell me that they're really good. The trap locations are completely RNG though, so it could just depend on the turret spawn locations for how effective they are. Also, luring tormentors to decoys does help a ton to give them a distraction. And then finally, Midtown is by far the easiest map. I also do tend to like Hive the best. The Fallen Shanks move a lot faster towards the ADU than the Cursed Thrall tend to. Also, the Ogres tend to be easier to kill than the Briggs, but Ogres do melt you. Pros and cons to both enemy types, but if you are going for wave 50 on Legend, it might be worth resetting your instance for the easier enemy type depending on your preference, and mine is Hive. Let me know if you guys think this video helps, ask any questions you may have down below, and feel free to recommend some builds down there as well. As always, have a good one, guys. Peace.